at Nehemiah chapter 6, verse 15 and 16. So on October 2nd, the wall was finished, just 52 days after we had begun. When our enemies and the surrounding nations heard about it, they were frightened and humiliated. They realized this work had been done with the help of our God. Thanks be to God. So just to give you some context about this verse in Nehemiah. So Nehemiah, he tells us about the third time that the Jews were freed. And in Jerusalem, where they were freed to, walls were built. It should be good. Can you just hold this? Thank you. Walls were built around the city for protection and so that the people could continue to worship God and reverence him. But the walls had been destroyed. So Nehemiah got permission to rebuild the walls from King Artaxerxes and ultimately from God. But Sanballat and Tobiah, they didn't know that he had already had permission to rebuild these walls. So they're thinking, oh, okay, he's just some hotshot wannabe. This is, he's taken over and this is what he's just doing just to be doing it. So they threatened him, they ridiculed him, they mocked him. But regardless of all of that, he continued to rebuild the walls as God had instructed him to. So just a question for you guys, and you can answer out loud. You don't have to answer out loud. It's up to you. But just to give you something to think about, has anyone ever driven past a homeless person and maybe they thought to themselves, wow, somebody really ought to help these people?
Many times.
Yeah, me too, Caleb. Or perhaps you might have some opinions about what the government should do or should not be doing. I know I do. So, or maybe you think to yourself, the school system is seriously broken and somebody needs to do something about it. Yeah.
Fighting and shooting and everything.
Yeah. It's a scary time. So in this message today, we're going to talk about staying in position to heal broken systems and to maintain holiness and wholeness, regardless of those who oppose us, or as the young people would say, regardless of their ops. So for those who have not seen the Disney movie Encanto, I'm totally about to spoil it for you, so get ready. So the movie starts with Abuela, who is the matriarch of the family. She is preparing Mirabelle, who at this time she's probably about 4 years old, so super tiny and cute with a big old little glasses. They're preparing her for the coronation ceremony where she's gonna touch the magic candle and receive her talent. So Abuela is filled with so much hope. Mirabelle is about to add to the family's myriad of gifts and talents to continue to help protect and care for the townspeople. So, and you can just imagine Mirabelle, a little 4-year-old little girl, walking down the aisle up to her door that's supposed to be her birthright. And she touches the candle and she goes to reach for the doorknob. And as she reaches for the doorknob, the door that was once illuminated just suddenly starts to disappear. So naturally, Mirabelle is crushed. Abuela is definitely crushed. And the townspeople are just confused. So a few years later, fast forward, it's her cousin Antonio's turn to receive a gift from the candle to contribute to the family and make them proud. So as they prepare for the coronation ceremony, Mirabelle tried to help her family prepare. She tried to help decorate and move stuff, and no matter what she did, everybody reminded her that she didn't have anything special, that she didn't have a special talent.
Mhm.
that she didn't have anything worth contributing to the family. But regardless of all of that, Mirabelle persisted. Even though she was left out and alone in her struggles, she persisted. And Antonio, he was so afraid. When it came time for his coronation ceremony, he was afraid that he would be just like Mirabelle and that the candle would pass him by. So at the time of his ceremony, he looks over to Mirabelle, who's like off in the corner somewhere, and he reaches out his hand so that she can escort him down the aisle. And of course, she doesn't really want to, and everybody's looking at her like, ooh, last time this coronation ceremony, it didn't really go that well. So she escorts him down, and Antonio gets a gift. And his gift is being able to communicate with animals. So once they go into the room, all of a sudden it's just like this huge jungle, and he starts running around on a tiger, and everybody's just amazed and all of that. But I want to pause here. And Canto. Yep, I want to pause here and ask you guys, how many of us have an abuela, or we know somebody who is like abuela, where just because you do things differently or your gifts and your talents don't look like the norm, they just attack you and they just come at your neck, and do they just do the absolute most, frankly, to put it that way. Yeah. So Mirabelle, she took after her mother's gift. Even though she went down to the door, nobody really thought that she had a gift. All the while, Mirabelle, even though she didn't even know that she was living out her gift, she had a gift. It just looked differently than what everybody else was used to. So Mirabelle's mom's gift was healing, physical healing. So she would prepare some food, and whoever ate it, if they had a broken arm, boom, they're healed. But Mirabelle's gift was the gift of healing, but through reconciliation and redemption, restoration and revelation. Maybe each of us has a special way of doing something that makes other people look at us weirdly. And we can see that how Mirabelle displayed her gift. We can see that throughout the Bible, and we can see that throughout the entire story of Encanto. So I want to take a moment to address just the spirit of suicide that's been going around lately. I don't know if you guys have heard about, I think she was Miss USA. Um, she recently she died by suicide. Um, yeah. So with that being said, whether you're here in person or you're online, if you don't hear it from anybody else, I want you to hear it from me. You're special, and I don't have to know you. I don't have to know of you to know that you're special, because God says it in his word in Psalm 139. He sees us. He formed us together in our mother's womb on purpose, for purpose, with purpose. So believe me when I tell you that each and every one of you is special. And at times we go through seasons of isolation. Each and every one of us does. Yet there are some who endure isolation for longer periods of time, where God has you by yourself. And he uses that time where you're by yourself to develop you and to develop the tools to prosper and overcome the hard times. And sometimes the people that we trust to protect us, the people that we trust who are supposed to love us and be on our sides, whether it's family or friends, sometimes they just can't see how special we are. Sometimes their words just cut. Just like when the house started to break apart. Um, Everybody's celebrating with Antonio, and Mirabelle goes off on her own, and she witnesses the house literally begin to crack and break apart. So she picks up a broken piece and it cuts her hand. Yeah, part of her hand, good chunk. Didn't cut it off though, just made a nasty cut, but it hurt. And when Mirabelle sees all this, she runs back into Antonio's room and she's frantic because the house is literally breaking apart. So she runs and gets her grandmother, and and by the time that everybody gets back to the courtyard where the cracks were and the house was falling apart, the cracks were gone. And sometimes God will show us things that only we can see. Some brokenness in our families, in our bloodlines, that only we can see. So by the time everybody got back and they didn't see any of the cracks that Mirabelle was so frantic about, everybody thought she was crazy. And sometimes a gift, it can seem like a curse. When everybody expects you to always be on, to always use what you do best so that they can benefit from it. And they don't just let you be. They don't just let you exist without doing anything. To simply be who you are with or without expectations of what they can get out of you. But your value is in who you are, not what you do, not what you can offer. So like Nehemiah and Mirabelle, we have to be committed to our mission and our vision, the things that God placed inside of us, the bad things that we see in our family, the generational curses, if you will, that just seem to just run down throughout the entire bloodline, whether it's addiction or failed marriages or domestic violence, unhealthy relationships, mental illness. The things God placed inside you, the gifts and the talents, they are purposed by God to bring healing to those areas of brokenness. So we have to remain determined despite the people who threaten us, sabotage us, despite the effort it will take to remain in position to rebuild. Nehemiah was a leader and he led well. He initiated the vision, which had to have made him feel like he was the only one doing the work at all. And sometimes when you're the first to break a generational curse or you're the first to call out a situation, it can be lonely. You feel like you're the only person doing the work. You feel like you're the only person going through this. But God always puts somebody in your life to help you not feel so lonely, to understand you, to let you know that He understands you and that He sees you. And sometimes you don't know how loud the silence is until you're in it by yourself. But Nehemiah, he knew that God wouldn't have him be alone forever. So he motivated other people to join in on his plans to rebuild the walls. So regardless of those people who ostracize you and push you aside, push through anyway and do what the Lord has called you to do. We saw that when Mirabelle approached Louisa about Bruno and the fading magic. At first, Louisa avoided talking to Mirabelle, but like the song said, the pressure almost made her explode. She couldn't take being forced to carry the burden anymore of the whole family, but she didn't feel safe enough to even be able to talk about the issues. until Mirabel gave her that safe place to talk about the issues. It wasn't until Mirabel initiated the move to figure out and resolve the problem of why the house was falling apart, why the magic was fading, what was happening to their family. And Mirabel is just literally walking around screaming, like, can you not see that everything's not okay and things are bad? And sometimes it takes being that person to resolve the issues. And Nehemiah didn't let his opposition stop him either. And unfortunately, they may not understand you until the process is complete. Because healing is a process. It's not just some fuzzy feeling that you get. It's not just, you don't just go from being broken and depressed and addicted or whatever to just automatically being healed and whole. It's a process. And it's not a pretty one, but it's necessary. So here are just some of the results of not healing from trauma or not healing in general. So I want you guys to ask yourselves, because we have to also examine ourselves and not just other people, because sometimes we can be the problem. So I want you to ask yourselves, does any of this describe you? So when we don't heal from trauma, we operate out of fear, pride, offense, like abuela, or we run and hide away from the problem like Bruno, or we just simply don't talk about it and we sweep it underneath the rug. Sometimes those who came before us, they get stuck in the past and they just can't move forward. And we can become blind, and we can teach other people to become blind and oblivious to the actual problems. And then another symptom of not healing is we can silence the problem fixers. They can shout at the top of their lungs like Mirabel, hey, do you see the cracks in the wall? They're literally right here. But because they're not whole, because they didn't forgive, because they didn't seek healing from God, they just push them aside. And the problem fixers, their shouts, they just fall on deaf ears. So my main points: healing is a crucial process and a precursor to thriving. So thriving, as Merriam-Webster defines it, it means to grow vigorously, flourish, to gain in wealth and possessions, to prosper. So in other words, thriving looks a lot like wholeness. It looks a lot like shalom, which means nothing missing and nothing broken. So we may not live in a perfect world, but we have a perfect God who calls us to thrive. He doesn't call us to live in lack where we're struggling all the time. And where we keep living through the same old cycles and things that our parents went through. God is doing a new thing in this season. So I'm here to speak to you prophetically. This movie was prophetic in, its own right. So like Ezekiel 37 in the Valley of Dry Bones, similar to the first song that we heard, God wants to revive us. He wants to reconnect the bones that are just laying in the he wants to reconnect the bones of his slain people who are just laying there waiting to be put back together. Nehemiah went through people mocking him, talking about him, cursing him, telling him over and over and over again that he should never, could never, would never succeed at rebuilding the walls. Healing is not easy. It's just not. It's like a broken bone. The recovery process is long and sometimes it's painful. but it's necessary in order to achieve the desired result. Point number 2. In order to heal, we must first knock down the walls and rebuild. So I like to think about home renovation shows. My fiance and I, we love to watch HGTV and the home renovation shows where they take these disgusting, dilapidated houses that look like just completely unlivable, and they take out everything that's broken. Sometimes it's a complete tear down, or they replace everything with brand new stuff that functions, that not only looks pretty, but it functions well. And then you decorate it, you breathe life into it, and it comes back to life. And by the time they're done, you would have never even imagined that a house that once looked so broken and so ugly could look that beautiful again. But that's what he wants to do with us. He wants to renew us. He wants to restore us to our former glory, to reconcile broken systems. He wants to redeem the lost, sin-drenched things and reveal us to the world so that we can point him right back, so that we can point everybody right back to him and say that God did this. Things need to be broken so that they can be rebuilt stronger. And lamenting, or in other words, falling apart and crying out to God, it's okay. It's okay to be sad about the things that have to be broken. But we can't stay in that position. So each of us is exactly the piece of the puzzle that the world needs in order to be put back together. It's not until we shine light on the things that seem dead and unfixable and ugly that we can actually heal. And right now is the time to heal. God is doing a new thing in this season, y'all. So he doesn't want us to just go off and try to heal ourselves. It's not going to happen. It's not going to work. So in Matthew 11:28, God tells us to take his yoke upon us because his burden is much lighter. Because he's carrying most of the weight. He's carrying most of the time, the energy that it takes to rebuild. Point number 3, not everyone is going to see your vision. Like Nehemiah, we see not everybody's going to see your vision. They're going to judge you. Even family. Even family. And there's freedom in knowing that they won't get you. As long as you pray, obey the Lord, and do what he's instructed you to do, nothing else matters. There are times when God only shows the cracks to us. He only shows the imperfections to certain ones of us because our ears and our eyes are actually in tune to his Holy Spirit, and we're actually in tune to the many earthquakes happening beneath the surface. He sometimes allows us to be isolated so that we can be that healing that's needed. The imperfection could look like family secrets. You know, that thing that's embarrassing, that's too shameful to talk about if anybody were to find out. Or in their case, they didn't talk about Bruno. They didn't talk about his prophecies or anything. And Mirabelle said something at the end of her song at that time when she was alone in the courtyard. She said, "I'm waiting for a miracle. I want to heal what's broken, show this family something new. So come on, I'm ready. I've been patient, steadfast, and steady." And we can sometimes feel like that too. Where it's just like, God, I've been going through this forever. My family still doesn't understand the vision that you've given me. My family, my friends, they just don't get it. And they don't see So when are you going to rescue us? When are you going to set me free from feeling so hopeless? But they could no longer keep up the charade of perfection. The cracks were there, whether they wanted to see them or not. And like Mirabelle, when we see things that need to change in our family and our communities, in the world, new things that need to happen, generational curses needing to be broken, the way others react to us for calling out the damages and for calling attention to the things that need to change, it can cut deep like the wound on Mirabelle's hand, regardless of all of that push through anyway. Really think and examine yourselves. This is point number 4. Does God have my yes? Both in Canto and Nehemiah's stories, they're called to leadership. Mirabelle was called to be the matriarch of her family. Because, well, it was getting old, let's face it. She wasn't going to be around that much longer, and the family needed someone who was going to lead them, who was going to motivate them to change. Nehemiah was called to lead and to motivate others to act on God's vision of shalom, spiritual revival, healing, protection. And since the people didn't know he already had approval to rebuild, it probably looked like he was just being bossy. Or, like my great grandmother always says, you're getting too big for your britches. Like in Ezekiel, when God told Ezekiel to prophesy to the dead bones who had been slain, I'm here to prophesy to you all today and encourage you all to give God your yes. And it's a continual yes. It's every day, it's in every moment. Lord, I'll do this. Yes, Lord, I'll do this. Despite everybody who's against me, God, I'll do this. Despite how I feel in this moment, God, I'll do it. Despite me feeling inadequate and like I can't, because it's not me who's going to make it happen, I'll do it because I know you're with me. And when God, bone to bone, flesh to flesh, there was this huge rattling sound. And right now in the earth, there's a huge rattling sound that God is reassembling everything that seems dead and slain and broken. He's reassembling his army. He's reassembling the dead to rise again as an army for God's kingdom with purpose, belonging, and life. It's natural to be afraid of the unknown when our talents may take where it's natural to be afraid of where our talents might take us and feeling like this thing is bigger than me. But just take it one step at a time, and God will put the next step right in your path and show you which way to go. We have to keep our focus on God no matter what the issues are around us or the people who don't support us. And just take it. No matter the situation, whether you're in the valley and things are going wrong, or you're on top of the mountain and everything's going right, know that it is well with your soul because God is your God. So how do we stay in position to rebuild with God and allow him to resuscitate the things that have died? First of all, we respond in prayer. Nehemiah, the first thing he did was to pray. Once he got those instructions from God, it's like, okay, how do I do it? And God gave him the instructions on how to make it happen. Next, we lead by example by obeying God, encouraging other people to join in on the vision. And then the third way is to stay in position to build what God instructs you. We have to maintain a posture of humility. And humility is just placing God's will above our own. It's remembering that he's our Father and that he's the head of our lives. And engaging in spiritual warfare, we have to pray. We have to pray that Satan is defeated and that God is victorious. We have to pray for the things that we don't see in the world, because everything that's happening in the world is a reflection of what's going on spiritually. So if there's turmoil in the world, there's a battle going on spiritually. So we have to pray for heaven's victory. We have to pray that heaven will be victorious and that it'll manifest here in the earth. Now we have to repent of ways that we've fallen short and ask God to forgive. We have to turn around and we have to forgive other people. The same people who persecuted you, who mocked you, we have to forgive. Yeah, we have to forgive them, and we don't forgive them for them. We forgive them for ourselves, to set ourselves free of all the negative feelings that they caused. And then lastly, we have to give God the glory. Worship him because he is our help.